Hello, friends. Welcome to Calligraphy Tips with Lindsey. Today, I'm going to show you how I use guidelines when I need to make multiples of the same kind of item, like addressing envelopes or filling out place cards. Pointed pen calligraphy is pretty popular for projects like these. Regardless of whether you're working for a client or on fun things to send to your friends and family, it's a huge help to have a good guideline template to make your writing easier, more consistent between each piece, and to help you minimize mistakes. My favorite setup is using an LED light pad underneath my writing to project the guidelines through to the front of the paper. I prefer light pads to light boxes because they're thinner and easier to write on comfortably. I have a large one, but you don't need something this big. Affordable, smaller sized options can be found fairly easily online. If you don't have a light pad, but you do have a glass table, you can set a lamp underneath your table to make it a DIY light pad. To make your template, you need to know the size of the paper you'll be writing on. These cards are about 7¼ inches by 5¼ inches. That's 183 by 133 millimeters if you're not in the US. You'll also need to know the X height you want to write at. That's the height of the lowercase letters, along with the proportions of the script you're using. I want to leave a nice margin around my writing, so I'm making my X height 7 millimeters to make sure I have plenty of room. I'm going with a basic copperplate style script today that has a 3:2:3 ratio for the ascenders and descenders to the X height. If you're not sure how to figure out what size to make your calligraphy, find the longest line in the text you're working from and write that line out at a few different X heights until you find a size that fits on your paper well. I usually use cheap copy paper for my guideline templates. You can also use tracing paper or transparency film. The most important thing is to use something that doesn't block too much light from passing through. First, I draw the outline of my paper. You can do this with rulers and squares, or you can just trace your paper. I like to use pen so my lines are nice and dark. If you're using some kind of plastic film, make sure your ink will completely dry on it. You don't want to risk your guidelines smearing and transferring onto the backs of your paper. Once I have my paper outline, I make a horizontal line marking the middle of the page. For this template, I'm only writing one line, and I like to place my lines just below the midpoint of the page, so this line will be my X height line. I measure down from my X height line to mark my baseline. And then I measure up from my X height line and down from my baseline to mark my ascender and descender lines. I like to use dashed lines for my ascender and descender guidelines. It doesn't make much of a difference when I'm only writing one line like I am here, but I find it very helpful when I'm using templates for projects that will have multiple lines. In addition to horizontal guides, I often like to add vertical ones. This helps me estimate where I need to start my writing so that it will be centered on my page. I like to put a dark vertical center line and then vertical spacing lines, either a ½ inch or an inch out to the left and right of center. Lastly, you can add a slant line if you like. I usually only add slant guides when I'm using a script I don't know very well, or if I'm working on something where it's really important that all my writing be very uniform. All of these guidelines are really dependent on how comfortable you are with your calligraphy and what you want for your specific project. If you're working on something loose and fun, you may only want a baseline to help you keep your lines at roughly the same place on each page. Once you have all your lines in place, your template is ready to use. But I like to take one more step. I like to make myself a light shield with black paper. This serves a couple purposes. Staring at a light pad for long periods of time isn't great for your eyes. It can be tiring and give you headaches, especially if you're sensitive to light. I usually use black craft or butcher paper for making light shields. I trace my paper and cut a hole with an X-Acto. Then I line up the opening with the outlines for my paper and tape my guideline template to the back. Now the only light coming through is where I need it, directly behind my guidelines. And the craft paper has a perfect little lip for me to use to quickly line up each page as I'm writing. I hope you found today's tip on using guideline templates for multiples helpful. Have you used templates like this before? Let me know if you have any tips of your own in the comments. If you'd like to stay up to date with when I have course offerings or all other manner of calligraphy-related activities and topics, you can message me your email address or subscribe to my mailing list on my website. I'll include a link in the description below. As always, I hope you'll join me again for future calligraphy tips, and thank you for watching.